Hey YouTube, it is Easy Prepper 101, and today I'm going to show you how to make homemade marinara sauce out of the tomatoes from our garden. Stay tuned. And today in this video, my wife, Mrs. Easy Prepper 101, is going to help me make our homemade marinara sauce out of the tomatoes, as you can see right here, that we got from our garden. This is a little over 10 pounds of tomatoes. You can see we have some nice big ones, some small ones, all different sizes. And that we already kind of did a little taste test of like making the marinara sauce, see how it would taste, and my wife knocked it out of the park. So right now we're going to kind of talk to you about what we're going to be using for this sauce, which is kind of very basic. Right here we have an immersion blender, which is a good key thing to have. Then we have a knife, some fresh basil, we have fresh garlic, we have some cut up onions, salt, olive oil. We have just a little trash bowl, and then we have a pot with a strainer in it. And what we're going to do is both me and my wife, we're going to kind of take you through how we created this sauce of kind of doing a lot of reading, watch some YouTube videos, and then my wife kind of made this up on her own, and it's just fantastic. So let's get started. All right, guys, in this next step, we're going to show you how to prep these tomatoes. My wife is going to be doing the cuttings because I am allergic to raw tomatoes. When they're cooked, I can eat them with like spaghetti sauce, and like when my wife makes chili, not a problem. But when they're raw and the acidic acid, stuff like that, my hands really break out. And I can wear gloves and a long sleeve shirt, but sometimes that doesn't protect me. So my wife is going to be taking it over.
Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is take any of our tomatoes, and all we're gonna do is chop the top off, throw it away. That's why I like having a trash bowl there. And then I'm literally just going to be quartering the tomato, and then I'm gonna put it into a strainer. So I have my pot with my strainer here, and when I get a good layer, I'm going to add a layer of salt, and what we're doing is sweating some of the water out of them. So then that way it'll take less time to cook the sauce down to thicken it up. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this on time lapse, and I'm gonna cut up some of these tomatoes for you. Okay, so now that I have a decent little layer of the tomatoes in the bottom, I'm gonna go ahead and take my salt, and I'm just gonna give a good layer of salt. One, it's gonna flavor it a little bit. It's also gonna help the sweating process to get some of that water out of the tomatoes.
As you can see, my wife did a fantastic job cutting the tomatoes and adding the salt to make them sweat. And what you're going to see is when we pull this up, you're going to see there's some water in there from having the tomatoes sweat. So what we're going to do is let this sit in there for about a half hour. The most we want to go is 45 minutes, and then we're going to start with the next step.
While the tomatoes continue to sweat, I'm gonna go ahead and get my garlic ready. And if you guys have never seen one of these before, they're amazing. It takes all of the skin off the garlic. You just put the little clove in there and roll it. And when it pops out, the skin is all either off or almost all the way off, and it's ready to chop up and use in our sauce. So all I'm gonna do now is chop this up finely, and then I'm gonna add it to my pot once the tomatoes are ready.
All right, so we did 30 minutes. So when we pull this up, you can see that is a decent amount of water that got sweated out. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this right back in. We're gonna take this over to the counter and kind of get things prepped, but now we're gonna be going over to the stove for our next step.
Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is take our onions, and this is some onions I had chopped up before. This is about a medium onion's worth. And we're going to add some olive oil. And we're gonna let these cook until they are translucent. And then towards the end, I will add the garlic. If you add the garlic right away, it will burn and you'll have to redo it. Okay, so now that the onions are almost translucent, I'm gonna go ahead and add in my garlic. Okay, now that my onions and garlic have cooked down, we're gonna go ahead and add all of our tomatoes. And then we're going to cook this all together. It'll start to become a little bit more soupy and saucy. And then once it actually becomes more liquefied, we're just gonna let it simmer for about an hour or two. But at this point, we're basically just gonna keep stirring it periodically to start to cook the tomatoes down.
All right, guys, as you can see, it's already kind of turning into a little bit of a soup, which is a really good thing. And this is only after about 5 to 7 minutes. You just continue to stir. As you can see, when we zoom in there, you can kind of see some of the onions on the tomatoes in there, so which is a really good thing. So we're going to kind of continue to do this over about the next hour. And if it does start to boil, bring the temperature down a little bit so you're not, burning it too much up. But now what we're going to do, the next ingredient is the basil. So we're going to add a little bit of basil in there. Just going to mix that up. So we've added the basil. We are going to just periodically stir this all together, just to kind of get the ingredients together, because you don't want anything to burn at the bottom. But just periodically over the next hour, just give it a nice little stir, maybe every 10 minutes or so, 15, however you think it. But like I said, also watch that temperature too. All right, guys, we are right now at the point where it is starting to boil, and this is when we want to turn the heat down and kind of get it to a simmer and just let that go for an hour. After an hour, then we're going to be kind of starting the next process.
Okay, so now that this is cooked down and simmered for about an hour, we have a really great consistency where the tomatoes have cooked down and have started to thicken up a little bit. And we're gonna go ahead and just use the Immersion Blender to get everything to a smooth consistency. Some people like to blanch their tomatoes and get rid of the skin, but there's a lot of nutrients and flavor in the skin, so I just like to mix them up with the Immersion Blender. Okay, and now that it's all mixed up, I'm gonna go ahead and let this continue to simmer for about another 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, little camera difficulty. I thought I was recording and we weren't, so we already added the seasoning in. So what we ended up doing was adding this Italian seasoning into there, which was like a tablespoon. Then we also just added some salt, some pepper, kind of stirred it up to see how it tastes, and then add little tweaks in that. Sometimes people add sugar, some people add a little bit of everything, but the whole thing is making this sauce for you. And that's the reason why this is a goal that we have for thinking about next gardening season, of making more tomatoes so we can make a lot more sauce so we can have stockpiled. But right now, with all that stuff added, we're going to let this kind of simmer for about another half hour to an hour. And we're going to kind of wrap this video up here for you in a few. All right, guys, we have now finished. Just a quick recap, we had 10 pounds of tomatoes. From using the method that we did, we were able to make 5 quarts of this tomato sauce, which we're going to be using for eggplant parm. That the eggplants we got from our garden we used. We didn't film that just because we didn't know if anyone would be interested. If you actually are interested in that, please write those down in the comments below, because we can definitely, it's the time for eggplant, so we can kind of show you our way of doing that. But we're going to be using some of the sauce for the eggplant, but then we're also going to be putting the rest into a food saver bag, and then taking that food saver bag and putting it in the freezer. The research and stuff that we got read online and stuff like that, most of the time will last, when it's frozen in the freezer with the food saver bag, is about 3 to 4 months. But me and my wife, we like to eat like a spaghetti or a marinara sauce or something like this about every other week, so which is really good. So we're going to go through it quick, but also you can this so you would have more long-term storage. But this is how we did our sauce. Hopefully you guys like that. If you kind of want to see how we do eggplant parmesan, write in the comment section down below. We would be happy to show you. hit that thumbs up. And if you like this video, before I say catch you guys down the road, I especially want to say thank you to my wife for helping me out with this. I really appreciate her help and helping me with other video ideas that we have. So thank you to my wife. And by the way, guys, we will catch you guys down the road.